Hello, I'm Rob Vincent and welcome to Molten Modular. Today I'm having a look at the Filtamp module 1006. It's part of the Behringer 2500 range that have been dripping out sort of a bit like a magazine subscription. So, you throw like, I don't know, $60, $70, $80 at Behringer, and every month they might come up with a new 2500 module. It's very exciting, and over time you can build up an entire collection. The Filtamp 1006 is of course based upon that legendary ARP 2500 modular synthesizer. The 2500 was this massive thing that was connected together by a strange matrix of sliders and audio and signal pathways that's fairly boggling by any standard. And despite ARP then moving on to other more popular instruments like the 2600 and the Odyssey and so on, the 2500 still retains that legendary status, partly because no one can ever get a chance to have a go on it, and also because it does have a remarkable sound and a remarkable reputation. It was a very unique synthesizer, and it's going to be interesting to see how well it translates to the Eurorack environment. Because, as I say, these are coming out in drips and drabs, and so the idea of building like a full ARP 2500 seems a little bit, I don't really know if that's going to work. It may do eventually when all the bits come out, but for the moment we just have a few modules to try. And actually that's really where my interest is. I mean, I can't really see myself trying to replicate an ARP 2500 modular system, but a number of the actual modules within the range are very, very interesting. And so I'm going to sort of try them out within that context. So you may be thinking to yourself, why is someone like me, who has been very critical of Behringer's behaviour, spending his time reviewing a Behringer module? Well, it's a good question, and a couple of ideas on that. First of all, I think it's completely possible to enjoy and exist within a thing that you are also criticising. In fact, I would say that that's pretty vital and healthy to critique the things we like. And secondly, and probably more importantly, is that these 2500 modules were actually designed by a guy called Rob Keeble of AMSynths, and he spent a lot of time, devoted his life, you could say, to getting under the skin of art products, of reinventing the 2600 and the 2500. And essentially Behringer offered him the opportunity to get his designs and his work out to a much wider audience. And so in reviewing these modules, what I'm actually doing is attempting to acknowledge and celebrate Rob's work on putting together these awesome modules, regardless of who actually manufactured them. You may also notice that my modules don't actually have the logo on the bottom here, and you may be wondering about that. Well, that's because I had this brainwave of an idea to do a satirical video on the nature of copying within our industry, and so to do that I used these modules and I scrubbed the name off. It was hilarious. It's in the channel, you should go and watch that. And that, I should say, is by no means a criticism of these particular modules, because in Eurorack we are always copying. Eurorack is based upon the copying and re-engineering of existing and old synthesizer technology. It's part of what Eurorack is. And so copying is not a problem in my eyes. My intention was purely to put forward the question as to where that can ultimately lead us, and is that a good and healthy thing? So, drama aside, let's have a look at the module and see if it's any good. I mean, perhaps what I should say is that I'm not a vintage synthesizer expert. I've not got a 2500 sitting over there that I can compare this to, and I don't think that's the point. It's not the point of my review. My review is to look at the Filtamp module in particular and just discover what it does. What does it sound like? What are its features? Is it any good? Is it useful? Is it something you should consider putting in your rack? And I'll leave the comments on the authenticity of the sound down to those experts who want to contribute in the comments down below. I'm also looking at the dual envelope generator, the 1033 as it is in the ARP collection. That is both fascinating and slightly annoying because I don't fully understand it, but I'm going to be using the two together a lot, and I think they make a great pairing, even if you don't fully understand what that bleeding envelope is doing. So how best to describe this thing? Well, the funny thing with these modules, right, is that Behringer don't really give you any information at all. Well, you get a quick start sheet on the website which gives you points out what the knob is, which is also labelled on here, so it doesn't really add any information to what you've already got by looking at the module. What it lacks is any sort of use case information, what you would do with that, what you would plug into those. So I guess it's just open to do what the heck we like. So that's what I'm going to do. I'll take you through it as best I can in my understanding of what it is that it's doing, and hopefully that'll be helpful to you. So let's give you the tour. What you have in this module that makes it actually a little piece of genius and incredibly useful in our space conscious Eurorack systems is that it's both a voltage controlled filter and a voltage controlled amplifier. So you don't need an additional VCA to be running this through, because normally speaking you run into a filter, then into a VCA. It's just the way of things. You don't have to do that with this because the VCA is built in. So you have two audio inputs for two sources mixed via these attenuating knobs here to give you the level over each. So you can mix two things in, set a level between them. They are then mixed together through the filter. The filter has three modulation inputs. The first one's called keyboard, and this is what you assume you would put a 1 volt per octave input into, and this controls the cutoff. That's the cutoff. Then you've got CV1 and CV2. CV1 is also 1 volt per octave, so is CV2. They're all essentially the same, and they are all routed in to the voltage control filter to control the cutoff. So you've got three modulation sources controlling the one filter cutoff knob, which is interesting. The other thing that's interesting is that both of those modulation inputs, CV1 and CV2, also control the VCA. So you can have a single modulation source coming in, controlling both the filter and the VCA from a single input. And you decide what is going where by just raising the knob on the module. So for instance, you've got CV2 here. That's for the filter. That's for the amplifier. CV1 here. That's for the filter. This one's for the amplifier. The keyboard modulation input is purely on its own, just doing the filter. The other two can do both, or either, or either, or this one, depending on how much you turn that up. And so the result is, bring up the input, bring up one CV to control the amplifier, this one. Bring up the other one to control the filter. Now I've got a modulation source going into the keyboard, just an LFO that's going to wang things about. So that is also moving the filter, as envelope 2 is controlling the filter as well. I can also put envelope 1 into the action as well. I don't know if that's helpful. Not really, it's just mostly open now. So now I'm using the same envelope that I'm using on the filter to trigger the amplifier, but by different amounts. So maybe what would be good would be to take it back to its basics, to have a look at it at a bit more of a standard, just put a sound in and see if we can sweep through it. Now, the fact that it has a VCA built in is partly annoying, because you have to keep opening it with something, because it's closed. So let's start with some basics then. We've just got a tone going in. If I turn the amplifier, all the way up past kind of 12 o'clock. At about, I would say 11 o'clock seems to be the right sort of place in how it compares to the opening and closing of a VCA in something like the Veils. Once you start pushing beyond that, it then starts ignoring or no longer being closed, and you can start to hear it. So if you are going to combine that with some CV, you're going to find yourself pushing it out quite loud. But just for this purpose, to get past the whole trying to add CV to something, I've just whacked the gain all the way up. So from here, I can close the filter. I'm going to add a little bit of resonance just to sort of 9 o'clock. Then up to 12 o'clock. Three o'clock. And then all the way up. I could put something into the keyboard input just to control the filter cutoff to give us a little bit of that self-resonance and see if I can get that going nicely. If I take out the input, so I'm just now hearing the filter. And obviously I've got control over how wide that range is that's coming in from the black sequencer. It's a beautiful sine wave. Nice. So let's pump that into our oscillator and put our oscillator back through. Bring the resonance off a little bit. So what we're going to do is bring in an envelope in order to sort out the amplifier a little bit better, because at the moment it's not really loud enough. So to do that, I'm going to bring a gate from... Oh, that's still doing it. Yeah, okay. We're bringing a gate from the black sequencer into the dual envelope here. Taking an output, I'm going to plug that into CV1. Now CV1 can be directed to the filter, like so. Yeah, you with me? Or I can direct it to the amplifier. So I put that full on. If I bring the amp back a little bit, so it's actually being properly shaped by the envelope rather than being stuck open. And then I can use the envelope here to shape it. Now I can also direct CV1 back again to the filter, so it can completely using that same shape. Now I still have two possibilities for modulating that filter cutoff because I've still got the keyboard input and I've got CV2. I could stick the output of an LFO into CV2, see what that does. I'll turn it up on the filter. It will start to sweep the filter, yeah. But I could just as easily put that into the amplifier. So what you get with the Filtamp is this ability to put in different forms of modulation, to combine them together, because it's all just being added up and applied to the cutoff knob, to get different textures and feels and bits coming in and out. You've got both sweeping and you've got jumping. You can stick melodies in there and jump it around. You know, you could be sticking in some sample and hold into the keyboard. You could be sticking all sorts of things. Why don't I do a bit of that? Of course, the beauty of having this dual envelope generator is that I can plug two different envelopes in, one controlling the amp, one controlling the filter. You know, or not, or the other way around, or both at the same time. So we're going to have CV1, this one, going to to the amplifier, and CV2 is now coming from this second envelope, which we're going to stick in there and take out CV1. So the dual envelope generator works as a pair, and it goes together. It only has the one gate input, and so both of them fire at the same time, giving you the ability to run two envelopes which are happening simultaneously. Let's try a different sound source. This time I'll take something from the surface. Something a bit more interesting, perhaps. Where's the output? There we go. Let's calm it all down a little bit. Let's stick this into CV1. It has a lovely sound. It really does. And yeah, those modulation inputs just makes you explore. I mean, you can use it as a regular filter with a single envelope flapping around on the cutoff, but it invites more than that. It says, come on, plug something else in, see what that can do. Right, let's take a different tack. Let's go in via a keyboard. Let's stuff something in that way and see if we can play with it in a different fashion. I want to introduce a couple of the elements of the dual envelope generator because it's interesting and because it's difficult. I want to try to work this out. Okay, that's lovely. So I'm just using the first side of this in order to open the amplifier. The second side I'm going to use to mess around with the filter. Let's take out the modulation. And we know how that works. If I turn up CV2 a bit more. this envelope also has another trick up its sleeve, which is that it can delay itself. What does that mean? Well, you know, I've been struggling to work that out myself. But essentially what you can do, if I turn this into a nice long... I can delay the start of the envelope as it's controlling the filter. The other thing it has is a trigger input. Now this trigger input combines with the gate input to give it more rhythm, I suppose. So when you have the trigger plugged in, the envelope will only fire when you have both a gate and a trigger input. So if you attach like a trigger sequencer to it, so the idea is that when I hit a note on here, I've got the Varigate 4 Plus pumping in triggers, which are creating the rhythm. I confess I haven't really got the hang of this yet. I'm still kind of playing with it to work out exactly what I can do. But maybe, if I don't do it on the... if I just do it on the filter envelope, that could be potentially more interesting. There we go. Well, hopefully that got across something of the point of what I was trying to make. But I'm going to try it from the black sequencer. Plug the trigger into there, and take a trigger sequencer from the mod out here. So now I have them both switched to multiple and the trigger coming in. I can put different triggers in, which is like taking gates in and out. So let's finish off by sticking the surface back in at the same time. Because it has two inputs, let's mix another thing in. So there we are, the Filtamp module 1006 or 1006 or 1006, depending on how you like to do these things. What do we think of that then? Well, I have to say it's a filter I'm going back to time and time again. I've put it in like my main rack and it's absolutely earning its place. I mean, I still love my Jove, don't get me wrong, but the Filtamp module brings a different flavour. Its ability to run with the dual envelope so that I've got these two things going on within here without having to patch it somewhere else is absolutely brilliant. And the sound I'm getting out is top notch. You know, it sounds fantastic. It does everything I expect a filter to do, and then it gives me all these other avenues to explore. It gives me this possibility of plugging in more modulation, of combining a filter with an LFO and doing something different. I mean, so often you drop back to the same old thing you're doing with the filter. You're doing that bass line with a bit of a acid sort of filter thing going in, and which is great. We love that. We enjoy that. But because of the additional modulation inputs on this, it gives you the opportunity to do so much more, to think about it differently, to throw in a wobble or a sweep, to even do tremolo over the amplifier, because it has all of that within itself. As I say, I have no idea whether it sounds close or identical to the real thing. And honestly, I don't really care, because what it does sound like, to my ears, is a thoroughly enjoyable, juicy, creative, responsive and dynamic filter. And I can't really ask for much more than that. Buying these two as a pair is completely brilliant, because having two envelopes running into the two sections of this and then leaving the keyboard section free for other modulation it's a no-brainer. It's brilliant. They're designed, I suspect, to be together. I mean, okay, I haven't quite got the hang of the gate delay or the trigger inputs. I mean, sort of, kinda, but just using them as ADSR envelopes by themselves does the job. So considering the price is ridiculously low when compared to most other modules, there must be some kind of downside. Well, I suppose, I mean, they're a little bit wide. I mean, it's almost as wide as my Jovan Veils, which is 4 VCAs put into a single thing. So you're not really reclaiming too much in the way of space. I could use, for instance, like a wasp filter at a single VCA and have a smaller filtering solution. But the convenience of having the VCA built in shouldn't be underestimated, really. Maybe the build quality then, is that up to scratch? Well, it is. I mean, that's perhaps the one area where you're going to start going, all right, okay, well, it is worth the price that it is, I suppose. I mean, they're all right. It's got a metal front end on it. They feel light because it's all going to be pretty much surface mounting here except for the hardware itself. They look relatively well built. However, the knobs, unfortunately, the tops of the knobs, although they look very metally and the colours are lovely, I mean, that's certainly something that's very striking about it, is the colour of these knob caps here. They are just essentially a piece of coloured card, or a silvery bit of card, and this one fell off and I can't find it, and that's a real shame. That's a bit sort of crap. Similarly with my amplifier knob here, there was a piece of muck on it, so I sort of scratched it with my fingernail, and now it's got a permanent scratch in it because it's not very resistant to something like scratching it a little bit. So, you know, compromises have been made, and I think we should expect that to some degree, and that's not really alarming considering the price point of the module. The other thing is that there are some modules, like the Modamp 10005 over here, that come with these white buttons. Now, from a distance, they look like, you know, NASA buttons, sci-fi buttons, the sort of buttons you'd find inside a spaceship, when no, they're just squidgy white buttons. And so although the 2500 models do look fantastic, they are okay in their actual physicality and reality. So yeah, there you go. I think I've made some rather nice sounds with it, I hope, in the course of this video, and hopefully that'll give you a flavour of what this is about and whether it's the sort of thing that deserves to be in your Eurorack. I mean, certainly I would say for beginners, when you're looking for something cheap and you just want to get started, this is not a complicated module. It's a filter and works like you expect a filter to work. So it's not like some of these other modules that Behringer have done, some of the Moog ones or the Roland ones, when they're a bit kind of weird and strange and have their own way of doing things. This module fits brilliantly into the Eurorack format and environment. It's not doing anything different or weird. It's not requiring any strange ancient knowledge to get it to work. You just plug something in, comes out the other side, you open it up with an envelope or something similar. And that is absolutely what I like about these 2500 modules, is that they are designed, you know, Rob Keeble has designed them to fit in Eurorack. They're not designed necessarily to be their own unit like the System 100 ones are or the System 55. This appears, at least to me, to be modules that can exist standalone within any rack. And it's that which I think makes it really interesting. So there you go. I hope that was helpful. I do plan to tackle most or all of the Behringer 2500 modules as they appear. I've got sort of 4 or 5 now. They gradually crawl their way out of the factory. So there you go. If you enjoyed this video, please feel free to subscribe and press like buttons and stuff like that, or join me over on Patreon, where you could throw me a few quid so I could do some more fantastic videos on fantastic things that make us all feel fantastic. And in the meantime, go and make some tunes.